I want you to be filling out your own copy of these notes as we go along. The topic for the day is object pronouns, and before I get into these notes, I'm just going to scroll ahead to a blank page to give you just a little bit more information about pronouns in general. We haven't really talked about it much this year. You don't need to write this down. This is just a little background information to help make everything make a little bit more sense. Pronouns replace nouns. So that's their purpose grammatically. Pronouns replace nouns. Nouns we know are people, things, ideas, etc. Okay? And pronouns replace nouns. Pronouns can come in the form of subject pronouns, which you're familiar with already. And then what we're going to talk about today are object pronouns. So the subject pronouns that you know are the words I, you, he, she, we, you, or y'all, as I tend to use to emphasize the plural, and they. And we know these words in French to be je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle, plural. But what we're going to talk about today are the object pronouns. And in English, these are the words me, you, him, her, us, you or y'all, and them. And you'll notice that there's some that are the same. It's going to be you, whether it's the subject or the object, or the you or y'all, whether it's the subject or the object. But they differ for the I versus me, he, him, she, her, we, us, and they, them. The ones that we're going to be doing today are these object pronouns. And these are the ones that refer to people. There are a few others that we'll add in as well. The difference between these is a subject pronoun is the one that does the action in the sentence, like I see the boy. But if we turn that sentence around, it's not the boy sees I. When I'm put into the object position instead of the subject position, it becomes the boy sees me. So that's what we're talking about today. Go back up to the beginning, object pronouns. There are two main types of object pronouns. There are direct object pronouns and indirect object pronouns. A direct object pronoun is used to replace a direct object in a sentence, and an indirect object pronoun replaces an indirect object. Okay? So you have a type of noun, whether it's direct or indirect, and that pronoun replaces that specific type of noun. You don't know yet, unless you know it from English class, what direct and indirect objects are, but I'm getting to that in a minute. What's going to be different about French than English is where you're going to put a pronoun in the sentence. Like I gave you the example, I see the boy sees me. But that me pronoun, in French, you're going to place it between the subject and the verb. And it would be like saying in English, the boy me sees. It doesn't sound out of order in French, but the order is the equivalent of the boy me sees. So a direct object, what is it? The technical definition of a direct object is that it answers the question, what? As in, who does the boy see? The boy sees me. Well, that was who, that wasn't what. Let me give you a better example there. I'm reading the book. What are you reading? The book. So the book there is the answer to the question, what? But that can be difficult to remember and is a little bit not so easy to understand. So another way that we can say that is that a direct object is what gets verbed. Okay, so if I give you an example, we could say something like, I eat the sandwich. What's being eaten? The sandwich. So the thing that's being eaten is what's getting verbed. It's the sandwich. Or he's reading the book. The book is what's being read. It's being verbed. So we have that as the direct object. In French, the pronouns that can replace a direct object are me, te, nous, vous, le, la, and les. Now there are some situations where le and la will turn into L' in front of a vowel. Now you might be noticing nous and vous, we've already seen those as subject pronouns. And if you remember down here on this other page, I showed you that you and you or y'all are the same in English, whether they're the subject or the object. Same idea in French. Nous and vous, it's the same word, whether it's the subject or the object. But you're going to need to know what these words are so you know which one to use. So me is the equivalent of me. Te is you. Nous is us. Vous is you or y'all. Le is him if it's a person. It if it's a thing. La is her or it. Les is them. So it's going to be them whether it's a person or a thing. All right, so the next step is, what does this all mean? Why are we going to use it? So we need to, step number 1, find our direct objects in the sentence. So we have to ask ourselves, what is being verbed? First sentence here, il mange la pomme. He's eating the apple. So what's being eaten? The apple. That's our direct object. So the direct object is la pomme. Oops. Okay, so now we have to ask ourselves, which pronoun is going to replace it? So what we're trying to do here is we're taking the sentence from he's eating the apple and we're replacing it with a pronoun. So we look at all of our available options. What makes sense? He's eating me? Nope, definitely not. He's eating you? Nope. He's eating us? Nope. He's eating y'all? Mm-mm. He's eating him? Nope. He's eating it? That could make sense to replace the apple. He's eating the apple, he's eating it. Okay, so we want it to mean it. That's what makes sense. Can't be them because it's only one apple. So then the question is it le or is it la? Because we have two choices for it. In this case, because of the la article here, we know that this is feminine singular. We're going to choose la as our pronoun. So a lot of times we're going to see the pronoun we pick is going to be the same as the article. So we took it from il mange la pomme, he's eating the apple. We chose la pomme as the direct object. We're going to replace it with la. And then based on what I said up here about the word order, between the subject and the verb. So we're not just going to put the la in the place of where la pomme was. It's not il mange la. We're taking the la and we're putting it in between the subject and the verb. Il la mange. He eats it in English. Yes, it looks like it eats, but just because the word order is different, it doesn't really change what it means. Okay, next sentence. Il invite Pierre et moi. He's inviting Pierre and me. So who's being invited or what's being invited? Pierre and me. So Pierre et moi is our direct object. So the question is, what's our pronoun to replace it? Is he inviting me? Yes, he is, but not just me. Is he inviting you? No. Is he inviting us? Yes. So he's inviting Pierre and me. He's inviting us. So our pronoun that makes sense is nous. And again, we put it in between the subject and the verb. Il nous invite. Okay, next sentence. Nous regardons les films. We're watching the movies. What's being watched? The movies. So that's our direct object. Les films. And we need a pronoun to replace that. Are we watching me, you, us, y'all, him or it, her, them? The one that makes sense for the movies is them. So we're watching the movies, we're watching them. So our pronoun is les. We put it between the subject and the verb. Nous les regardons. Okay, next one. J'achète un CD. I'm buying a CD. What's being bought? A CD. That's our direct object, un CD. You can tell how long it's been since I wrote these notes because nobody buys CDs anymore. And which pronoun replaces it? I'm buying a CD. I'm buying it. Makes the most sense. Un CD tells us that it's masculine singular, so we're going to choose le, which would become je le achète. Is that what we want? No, because of those two vowels together, that doesn't work. So we're going to do je l'achète for pronunciation. Okay, last one. Tu vois tes amis. You see your friends. What's being seen? Your friends. They're the direct object. Tes amis. Okay, now this is one can get a little tricky. Your instinct is going to be to put te in there because you see te. But what that means there would be you see yourself. If you're being seen and you're doing the seeing, it would be you see yourself, and that's a reflexive verb. That's not what we want to say. You see your friends. Are you seeing me, you, us, y'all, him or it, her, or them? You're seeing them because it's referring to a plural group of people. So we want les in this case. Tu les vois. You see them. On to the indirect objects. An indirect object is to or for whom an action is completed. So it's when you do something for someone or you do something to someone. That's the indirect object. You're going to find it. You're going to know that you have an indirect object because it's going to follow a or pour. So those are the French prepositions for to and for. You're going to find it in the sentence because there'll be an a or a pour immediately in front of it. And it's a person. An indirect object has to be a person. That's going to be an important detail later on. It won't matter so much right now, but I want that in your notes, that an indirect object has to be a person. You're going to notice that there's some overlap. There are some pronouns that can be both direct and indirect. So we have me, te, nous, vous, and then the ones that are different are lui and leur. So these are going to mean to or for, me. So me can be the direct object, me. It can be like he likes me, because I'm what's being liked. It can also be an indirect object. You can do something to me or for me. I could say, you make a cake for me. And it's still the word me, but in this context, it's going to be an indirect object. Te is still you. Nous is still us. Vous is still y'all. Lui is both him and her. To or for him, to or for her. And leur, them, to or for them. So some examples again. Marc lance le ballon à moi. You might notice that this sentence has both a direct object, le ballon, and an indirect object, à moi. Okay, so the sentence is saying Marc throws the ball to me. So we have a what is being thrown. We have le ballon as the direct object. And we have à moi, the indirect object. So what we're going to say is the indirect object is à moi. Technically, it's only the moi that's the indirect, the person, but we're going to replace that à as well. So anytime we're doing this in a sentence, the à or the pour that's in front of it is going to be taken out and replaced with the pronoun as well. So à moi, to me, is the pronoun me. And then we're not going to worry about trying to replace le ballon at this point. Later on in this year, I think it comes up in chapter 6, we'll worry about replacing two pronouns or two nouns at the same time with two pronouns. But one step at a time right now. We're still going to put an indirect object in between the subject and the verb, just like we did with a direct object. So we have Marc me lance, and we're going to leave le ballon in there for now. So Marc me lance le ballon. Marc throws the ball to me. Je parle à mes parents. After the à, that's our indirect object, à mes parents. Okay, so the sentence starts off by saying, I talk to my parents. So we want to say, I talk to, which one makes sense? I talk to me, I talk to you, I talk to us, I talk to y'all, I talk to him or her, or I talk to them. The one to replace to my parents is going to be leur, I talk to them. Goes between the subject and verb. Je leur parle. Tu écris à ton cousin starts with the à there. So our indirect object we'll say is à ton cousin. So if you're writing to your cousin, you have to choose. You're writing to me, you're writing to you, you're writing to us, you're writing to y'all, you're writing to him or to her, you're writing to them. To him or to her makes the most sense, in this case him, because cousin is masculine. But the word lui works for both him and her. So lui is the pronoun that's going to replace à ton cousin, and you're going to end up with tu lui écris. You'll notice, for lui I did not tell you that it can be contracted. It's not, the letters aren't going to change. So if we go back up here, le and la can become L apostrophe. Lui is not going to change. So even when you have a situation like we've got right here with all those vowels, we're just going to leave it as is. There's nothing we can do about there. Pronunciation-wise, lui écrit, a French person is okay with that. And last one, je parle à Luc et toi, starting with the à. Our indirect object is à Luc et toi. So I'm talking to Luke and you. So the pronoun here, again, be careful, because just because you see the et toi there does not mean that it's going to be te, because it's to Luke and you. So it's those two people together. It's you and somebody else. So that's going to become vous. So that sentence, je vous parle. Okay, so those are your indirect objects. And there are two other pronouns. We don't have any equivalent for these really in English. These are going to replace prepositional phrases. A prepositional phrase is the preposition and a noun that comes after it. A preposition, those are those short words that typically indicate location. I've heard them described as the squirrel in the tree, up, down, around, in, over, under. It's all of those words. So we're going to use the pronoun I, this letter Y right here, is going to replace an expression, a prepositional phrase that begins with the preposition a, chez, or dans. Now I know I just told you up here that an indirect object is going to follow a, and then I'm telling you right here that a is going to be at the beginning of an expression that will turn into e. So this is a source of common confusion, and when we get here, we'll talk about this in class. The preposition a can indicate either an indirect object or e. An indirect object is always a person. If it's not a person, often it will be a place, use e. We'll get to that eventually. When we first practice these, starting on Thursday, we'll practice just direct and indirect first, and then we'll practice just e and all, and then we'll mix it all up together. So we'll talk about that more when it becomes relevant. And then the last pronoun, en, is used to replace an expression that begins with, I have to use the pen here, de. Okay, I want to take 1 minute to just explain one more detail that will become important as we work on this. I just want to refresh your memory on the contractions that I've told you, a and de, but I want you to remember that sometimes a forms a contraction. So if you have the article le, you'll see o, right? A and lay is o. So if you see one of these, you still have a at the beginning of your expression. You just have a in the form of a contraction. Same thing happens with de. If you have de and le, that's du. De and lay is day. So if you see du or day at the beginning of an expression, then you have de. You just have de in the form of a contraction. All right, one last thing. I want to try to summarize this for you. If you see in a sentence, you've got the preposition a or pour, and it's a person, you have an indirect object. And you then have to choose me, te, nous, vous, le, la, or les. If you have a, chez, or dans, and it is not a person, then it's going to be e. You don't have any choice to make. If you have de, then that's en. If you have, and I'm going to go backwards here, no preposition, no a, pour, chez, dans, or de, then it is a direct object. And I should have spaced this out a little bit better, but I'm too far into this video to start over. So if you have no preposition, you've got a direct object, and then you're going to choose between me, te, nous, vous, le, sorry, did this completely wrong, le, la, or les, whereas for the indirect object here, what I meant to say was Louis or leur. Okay, let me read through that again because I messed that up. When we go to practice this, starting on Thursday, when you look at a sentence and you have to choose what to replace the noun expression with, if there's no preposition at the beginning of an underline, everything in these sentences will already be underlined for you when you're choosing what you're going to replace it with. I will have told you what you're replacing. It will be underlined. So if there's no preposition at the beginning of that underline, and by no preposition, I mean it does not have a, pour, chez, dans, or de at the beginning of the underline, it's a direct object. And then you have to make the choice between me, te, nous, vous, le, la, or les, depending on the meaning. If it is a person and a or pour is at the beginning of the underline, you have an indirect object, and the choice you'll make is between me, te, nous, vous, lui, and leur. If you have a, chez, or dans at the beginning of the underline, and it's not a person, usually it will be a place, but not 100% of the time, then it's e. No choice to make, just going to be e. And if you have de at the beginning of the underline, then it's going to turn into a. And all you needed to do for today is fill out these notes as you watch the video. Please turn in your notes so that I know that you have them done and you can get credit for that. And then that's it for today.